Today we're going to be looking at Donkey Kong. The old one. Surely you remember Donkey Kong, the 1981 Nintendo arcade classic where you guide Jumpman through multiple screens to save your ladylove from the uncivilized ape Donkey Kong? It got ported over to many home video game consoles as a result of its popularity, and then Nintendo made their own console to release the best home port of Donkey Kong up to that point. Yes, 1983 saw Nintendo launch their family computer system, and one of the launch titles for that system just so happened to be Donkey Kong. Which makes sense since the whole point of the Famicom's existence was to play a mean game of Donkey Kong. Everything that came afterwards is considered a bonus. 2 years later, the Famicom would be repackaged overseas as the Nintendo Entertainment System and, barring a spell where it included a robot, the most notable pack-in title and pretty much the killer app for the console in its early days, Super Mario Bros. And then Donkey Kong came along not long after in both solo cart format and then as part of a compilation cart called Donkey Kong Classics, which we sampled ages ago. But needless to say, Donkey Kong probably didn't have the same impact among the NES crowd that it did with the Famicom crowd 2 years earlier, which makes sense because, well, a lot can happen in a couple of years. And really, when you compare this Famicom version to what was available on other platforms such as Atari or ColecoVision, Donkey Kong pretty much nailed the look, the sounds, and the feel of the arcade game, despite some compromises, of course. Yes, it's missing a whole level, which honestly I could give two donkey doo-doos about, and the intermissions between levels were omitted, and yes, they had to stretch out the originally vertically oriented display to fit a standard television display, but what did make it through made the transition quite nicely and resulted in quite possibly the best home conversion of Donkey Kong for quite some time. The only way you could have gotten a better version would have been to emulate the arcade original, which wouldn't have come along until years later. Or just remake the whole game on Game Boy and add a whole bunch more levels, that works too. So anyway, in Donkey Kong you control Jumpman, aka Mario, aka Bob, aka whatever name we feel like giving it at the moment. A carpenter who must make his way up to the top level of each level to save his ladylove from Donkey Kong, who just seems to be minding his own business and just wanted some company. You do this for 2 levels, and then on the 3rd level, you have to remove the yellow bits from the platforms for the whole structure to collapse and give DK a headache, but not outright kill him because the game loops back to the 1st level, except it's a touch harder, and thus the circle of life continues. Control is responsive and pretty easy to figure out. The D-pad moves Jumpman around, walk, climb ladders, and A button jumps, and B button does nothing, and start button pauses. That wasn't so hard, was it? Gameplay is pretty much closer to the arcade original than the prior version somewhat. Obviously, the squished nature of the game's visuals to fit the horizontal display, as well as the missing intermissions between levels, makes it less than perfect, but honestly, they gave it a good effort, and it looks fairly close if nothing else. The sound effects are almost on par with what you got in the arcade game, perhaps a tad crisper. And honestly, what else is there to say? It's Donkey Kong by Nintendo on their own hardware that they made so that people can play what could be considered for a time the definitive home port of Donkey Kong and accept no imitations. The surviving levels made the cut with little to no compromises, the controls are tight, the gameplay is solid, the audio is superb, and the presentation is top-notch. And while arcade Donkey Kong is available nowadays via Hamster, Donkey Kong on Famicom is still enjoyable enough fare. All in all, a quality port that's worth checking out. And if you could somehow play the revised port that adds in the missing level, that'll win you some extra bananas. But that's about all you're getting.